Hi, welcome back to Pirates of Savannah, the audio book. Please remember to check out lupolink.com, or you could actually donate, help me out, and maybe even buy the commercial-free version. Anyway, enjoy the...
Chapter 11, Land Pirates and Battle Rats. With a mix of swamp marsh and thick woods, the men moved slower than anticipated. Even the shortest distances took much time, but eventually they made it to the rendezvous point west of Fort San Diego. While Archibald tied yellow and black cloths to his arms, Patrick questioned, "What do you know about the savage sent to meet us?"
"For starters, they don't care much for being called savages," Archibald grinned. "The scout is an older warrior, held over from the Yamasee War that ended in the 17th year. My understanding is that was a terrible war."
Archibald told the story of the Yamasee War.
"The Yamasee hated the Spanish and their evangelizing for Christ and the Catholic Church. The Yamasee joined forces with the English in Charlestown and assisted in slave raids deep into Spanish territories. Then something changed. To this day, I don't know what. I'd bet the colonials cheated them or took a shite on one of their burial grounds. Who knows?
The Yamasee then turned on their former allies, attacking Charlestown and the surrounding areas.
Other tribes that hated the British as well joined the Yamasee cause and attacked. It was a hell of a collection of tribes that convalesced to spill British blood. With the Yamasee, the Creek, the Cherokee, Savannah River, the Shawnee, Congaree, Waxhaws, Petey, Chickasaw, Catawba, Apache, Apalachicola, Unisee, Cape Fear, Chiraw, and others. The English were on the edge of defeat until the Cherokee turned on the savage allies and saved the British. Time and bribes heal a lot of old wounds."
Archibald smiled.
"Now most of these tribes are allied with the English. Many of the warriors hate the British and only pretend to help them until they can spill their blood again. The man we are meeting is one of those. He hates both the British and Spanish, and will keep our business quiet. Currently, he's spending time with the Creek at a settlement called Euphalaia and is trading deer pelts. Most of his tribe was killed during the Yamasee War, and he is one of the last of his bloodline. When he was a younger warrior, he spent many days around St. Augustine, capturing the enemies of his tribe, selling them into slavery. The British and Spanish would sell those captured men to the Caribbean to work in the sugar fields. Sovereign Quinn warned me to show him respect because he is a legend to his people. His skill with a bow is extremely deadly, and he's a master tracker. This bow has killed 34 English, 24 Spanish, and 55 enemy tribesmen. Each bead on my bow is a soul it has captured,"
a voice said from behind a tree.
"I waiting all morning here. You make much noise. You'd be easy to kill."
A white-haired Indian stepped out from behind a tree. He was short and muscular, but aged. His face looked like a wrinkled leather satchel with fiery coal eyes. He was bare-chested and had a decorated bow and a quiver hung over his shoulder. He was like a proud stone, and little expression came from his scar-riddled face. On his bead belt hung a strange-shaped war club, which was decorated with feathers. The three men jumped back, startled by the warrior's mysterious entrance.
"Quinn told me to find man who wear yellow and black on arms,"
the old warrior questioned.
"You be him?" "I assume you're Ligo Chi. Your English is impressive." "Quinn did tell me what a great warrior you are, but he had never told me you were also so well educated,"
Archibald complimented.
"Learning good English make me much silver,"
Ligo Chi replied.
"What you whiteskins want from me? We need you to guide us over the next few months. We need to stay close to the Redcoats, but staying away from their war. We want to profit from the Redcoats after the battle,"
Archibald explained. Ligo Chi burst into a loud laughter.
You three want me to help you be battle rats. You want to steal Redcoat's fallen warriors' weapons. This is disgraceful behavior to my tribe. Will you use these fire sticks to kill the English? We want to sell them to people who will kill the British,
Archibald replied.
Let us smoke on this.
Li Chi calmly said as he sat down. The three white men awkwardly sat in a circle and watched as the white-haired man produced a small pipe from the bag he was carrying. Archibald watched as the old warrior pulled out a bud of hemp plant and packed it into his pipe. He had made a small bundle of dead foliage into a miniature torch, then ignited it with a flint rock and a small piece of metal he had. The men passed the pipe around and smoked in silence until Patrick took a smoke and coughed violently. The coughing amused the old man, and he broke into laughter. Li Chi encouraged Patrick to slow down and not suck the smoke so fast. Patrick failed miserably at smoking, to the group's delight. Tension lifted as laughter and the blue smoke filled the air. The indentured blacksmith was now turning green and leaned over to spit some brown ooze out. The old man smiled and announced,
I will help you, Whiteskins. The British killed many of my tribe, and it would make my tribe's spirits happy to see more Redcoats dead.
All the men, except the very green-skinned Patrick, sat in celebration and smoked to their union. They puffed the pipe long until they became very hungry, and Archibald prepared a dinner of venison and berries. Chilly nightfall fell in the new year as muzzle flashes and loud cracks could be seen in the dark. The four men were dressed in heavy furs as they watched from afar while Oglethorpe's strange mix of troops overwhelmed Fort San Diego. The fort fell quickly the next day, with minimal casualties on both sides. The Spanish abandoned the fort in the face of overwhelming odds and fell back into the marshy woodlands. A few loyal Spaniards covered the retreat and were now being run down. Li Chi advised,
Battle, too one-sided. Not good for battle rats. Wait till next fort.
Archibald conceded to the old man's raiding experience and followed his advice.
Where do you think the next fight will be? He questioned. Spanish flee to Fort Picoleta, not far from here. British follow soon. We follow too,
the white-haired man predicted. The old creek would be correct. The Spanish fell back and reinforced Picoleta, as Oglethorpe's brigade slowly followed, closing in on the next fort. The British were aware of Archibald's party, but it aroused little suspicion since it was common for families and merchants to follow the armies. Adding to the legitimacy of the ruse, Archibald allowed himself to be employed by the Scottish troops, making small repairs on their weapons. The siege of Fort Picoleto married that of Fort San Diego. Oglethorpe's men, with overwhelming numbers, forced the Spanish to fall back once again. No opportunity presented itself for the band of scavenging battle rats. The next fallback for the Spanish was Fort Mose. Archibald was ambivalent about the invasion until the siege of this fort. He explained to Patrick he did not want to see the fall of a group of slaves who were now truly free men. He continued explaining to his apprentice that as early as 1687, the Spanish government had begun to offer asylum to British slaves, hoping to undermine English control. Around 1693, that asylum was made official by the Spanish crown, making it known that runaways would find freedom in Spanish Florida, but a price had to be paid. The slaves would have to convert to Catholicism and pledge themselves for 4 years of service to the Spanish crown. Ever since the days the black soldiers aided in repelling a British attack on St. Augustine in 1728, a grateful governor, Montiano, abolished slavery in Florida. To cause even more disruption to the English, Fort Mose was set up as the very first free black settlement. The Spanish governor hoped this would encourage slaves to escape from the British settlements and disrupt their economy. Governor Montiano essentially established a free fort of rebels, willing to fight against the British to protect St. Augustine. Fort Mose now had slaves from many tribes, living free together for a common cause. There were natives from Mandinga, Farah, Arara, Congo, Karabali, and Minna. Tribes that before would never be together now lived in harmony and freedom in this fort. When Archibald finished, he grimaced and confessed, "It hardens my heart to see the British take fire on this fort." Days later, 3 men and their savage guide watched a familiar scene which they had already witnessed twice. General Oglethorpe quickly overwhelmed the Spanish fort, and the African freemen fled into the marshes. The British made an example of the fort, burning everything they found to ashes, and sent a clear message to the former slaves. The redcoats only spared what they could use for their own military objectives. Many soldiers laughed as they took great joy taking torches to their homes of the Africans and smashing their artwork left behind. The 4 battle rats watched in sadness as a symbol of freedom fell to another political power grab. It was decided again by Ligo Chi not to make a move. Again, the time was wrong. They would keep following the battle. The old warrior started to pursue the fleeing black men, when a tree next to him exploded into shards of bark and splinters. He turned his head to spot a handful of Spanish soldiers firing at the group. The white men panicked and dove into brush behind some trees as multiple cracks of gunshots echoed. They clumsily started drawing their blades and loading their muskets. The old man had his bow in hand, and an arrow was already flying through the air. The aim was true, and the colorful feathers of an arrow could be seen sticking from the chest of a Spanish soldier. With their shots fired, the Spanish soldiers were scurrying to push shot and powder down the barrels with their ramrods. The white-haired, wrinkled old man was dead calm as he knocked another arrow into his bow. Patrick was convinced the calmness of the old warrior in the face of death could only come from a life of battle. Ligo Chi was already knocking another arrow while the second arrow pierced another soldier's chest. A third soldier raised his musket to fire, only to be struck in the neck with a colorful shaft of wood. The 4th Spaniard panicked and tried to run, only to be pierced in the back, and he fell to the ground. The last Spaniard charged the old Indian, using his musket as a 2-handed club. Archibald fired a shot that did not find its mark, while Patrick and Isaac fumbled with their musket loading. The old man coolly pulled his war club from his belt, and with a fluid spinning motion dropped his body and struck the incoming soldier in the knee. The Spaniard dropped, and the Indian finished him with a swift death blow to his skull, which had so much force it shattered the club. Calmly, the old man picked up the dead man's musket, and then collected his arrows, sticking in the bodies littering the field. Letting out a loud Indian battle cry, the warrior smashed the heads of his fallen enemies with a musket stock, one by one. The white men watched in amazement and could not comprehend what just happened. One old man had just effortlessly killed 5 other men in less than 2 minutes. Patrick and Isaac stared dumbfounded in disbelief as Archibald ordered,
"Wake up! Search those bodies and then hide 'em good."
The men nodded and began collecting weapons from the dead Spaniards. They circled like vultures as they picked the bodies clean. The corpses were soon hid, and the party retreated into the safety of the swamp to tally their swag. Archibald was impressed with the haul. 5 muskets, bags of shot, and horns of powder. Also found were 2 Spanish blades, 3 pairs of boots, belts, 5 water skins, and rations. The clothes were bloodied and ruined and not even considered. Archibald then divided the spoils, giving each man a musket. Patrick was handed the musket used by Ligo Chi to bash in the skulls of the dying Spaniards. He slowly examined the bloodied hickory stock. "Wait, what are you doing? That musket's already sighted. Careful, or it won't shoot straight," Patrick warned.
"I know what white men's fire stick. Too slow. I fire 10 arrows in time to fire and reload 1 gun."
Ligo Chi boasted as the Indian broke down the flintlock, casting the barrel and bindings and lock aside. He took a large knife off his belt and hacked at the stock. He shaved it and whittled it until it fit in one hand. He gave his new war club a practice swing and seemed pleased with the outcome. It was only then that Patrick realized Ligo Chi's last club was also a musket stock. It made sense to Patrick. From afar, it would look like the Indian was carrying a gun and possibly deter hostiles, and the hardwood of the stock would make for a strong club. Later that night, Isaac and Patrick found it hard to sleep. Neither had ever seen a man killed as they had witnessed earlier that day, and the images were hard to bury. Unsurprisingly, the white-haired warrior and the Scotsman slept well. After killing close to 100 men, Patrick guessed death no longer bothered the Indians' sleep. Almost 5 months had passed, and the Spanish in St. Augustine numbered almost 2,000, and many sought refuge within the wooden walls of Fort Castillo de San Marcos when Oglethorpe's navy started bombarding the town. A mass evacuation of the town of St. Augustine had been underway for days. There were only about 750 soldiers. The rest were families and merchants, and were all crammed into the fort, slowly starving to death by the siege. General Oglethorpe's forces had swelled close to 3,000 soldiers at his command. He was finally joined by Ahaya, the cowkeeper, and his Oconee warriors. The Oconee had a deep hatred for the Spanish in Florida and were excited to join the British general's campaign. The rest of the British fleet finally arrived, led by Commodore Pierce, and had blocked the ports while Oglethorpe deployed his batteries on the island of St. Anastasia. But the Spanish general, Manuel de Montiano, had an advantage of an impenetrable fort. The British general's cannons were too weak to take down the fort walls, so the armies stood at a standoff. It was now the scorching hot month of July, and this invasion had become a waiting game. "I can't believe we're still in this shit box of a swamp," Patrick whined to Archibald as he swatted another mosquito. "Why the hell hasn't Oglethorpe just given up yet?"
The general's ego will not allow him to leave. He won't be shown up by Admiral Vernon, Archibald explained. When he returns to London, he wants to be the toast of the town.
"Who's Admiral Vernon?" Patrick asked. Archibald explained the history.
On the 22nd of November, 1739, Portobello, a silver exporting town on the coast of Panama, was raided as an attempt to damage the Spanish finances and to weaken its naval capabilities. The poorly defended port was attacked by 6 ships of the line under Admiral Edward Vernon, who captured it within 24 hours. It was a very easy battle for the admiral. He captured a great deal of Spanish treasure and returned to the king as the country's newest hero. Oglethorpe was envious. He desperately wanted to launch his own invasion on the Spanish and return to England as a hero himself. So I don't think we're going anywhere, lads.
"Welcome back, Sawbone," the Scottish warrior piped up. Isaac walked into the camp, covered with blood.
That is the 3rd man I amputated that died this week. I can't take any more of the screams. We ran out of spirits and rum weeks ago. Now I have to put a bucket over their head and smash it hard to knock the men unconscious. My bone saw is so dull, it almost took me 30 minutes to cut through the last man's thigh. Half the troops on both sides are incapacitated and dying of the black water shits. I have never seen such a horrible loss of life just for some man's fucking ego.
Patrick gave the brawny man a hug, compassionate of his old friend's frustration. As Isaac continued,
I had 2 men refuse to let me work on them because I was a Jew, because they thought I would use my devil's favor to heal them. They died in the mud making jokes about my horns up my yarmulke. I hate this place, Isaac yelled. Today I also treated the 100th snake bite. I have been out of pulpus for a month. All I can do is get one of their soldiers to suck the venom out and then stick his foot in the cold creek. I am really grateful Lego Cheese showed us how to pad our boots, protecting us from bites. At least all the snake meat's been tasty, he complimented.
Archibald gave praise to the old scout.
You're the reason we never got sick. We're very grateful you kept us healthy and helped us avoid the bad water. You honor your tribe.
He then handed the Indian a leather pouch full of hemp bud. The old man grinned a little. He loved compliments from the white man, as he quickly got out the pipe to smoke.
Lads, I know this has dragged on for a long time, Well, we have to come back with something big now to justify this excursion. Just a little longer. The Spanish are starving and almost broke. Soon we will have our chance.
Archibald persuaded. Easy for you to say. You went back to your family for the month of May. Isaac and I are nothing but mosquito welts. How the hell is it that they never bite Ligo Chi? Patrick questioned with a laugh.
I had to go back and sell those guns. My family needed the money to live on. I had to file off all the markings and sold them for parts. I also worry about the family's safety and had to be sure that they were still healthy. Heather did tell me to tell you she has some cornbread waiting for you, Archibald said.
I'm sure it's still good to eat, lad. The Scotsman laughed. A mottled orange and white dog had adopted the group over the last few weeks. He had a shaggy fur with a white nape, white feet, and at the end of his tail it looked like it was dipped in white paint. He had a long black snout and intense high energy. He wandered into the camp, starving one evening. Patrick threw him some scraps from a doe the Indian hunted, and now it was impossible to get rid of the dog. William thought the dog looked like an ancient Scottish cattle dog called a collie. The collie was a welcome interruption for the months of monotony as the group debated for days what to name him. The group suggested male names for the dog, but after Patrick discovered it was a female, his suggestion won. He named the dog Garland after his youngest sister he left behind in London. In a very short time, Ligo Chi had put the dog to work for her meals. He trained the collie to charge bushes and flush game out. The two seemed a perfect match, like they'd been hunting together for years. Over the days, the old warrior taught Patrick and Isaac a great deal about tracking and hunting. He showed them how to preserve meat, smoking it over a fire pit. Even though Patrick learned some very useful skills, the one that most impressed him was the trick the Indian did with corn kernels. The white-haired man would take a deep pot with some animal tallow melted down and some corn seeds. When the grease grew hot enough, the corn would jump up and turn to white puffs that looked like cotton. The first time Patrick heard the popping sounds, he jumped out of his skin and the old man laughed wildly. Isaac threw some salt in the mix, and they really enjoyed the new treat. Garland would howl at night when the people ate. Patrick would take some leftover cornmeal, ball it up, and drop it into the grease. It would turn to round brown balls that tasted like cornbread on the inside. He would throw the corn balls to the collie to keep her quiet. He soon added the term hush puppy when he gave the canine a cornmeal ball. The dog learned very quickly to quiet down whenever someone said hush puppy. It was now the very early morning of June 26, 1740, and it was still very dark. The old Indian woke the party and told them to pack quickly. He reported he had seen a large group of African and Spanish warriors quietly sneaking through the marshes.
We go Fort Mose now.
The Indian roused the sleeping man.
This army attack Fort Mose soon before sunrise.
The parties packed with record speed, and within a half hour were on the move into the deep marshes. The small party caught up with the invading force, and Patrick was amazed at what he saw. The African warriors looked similar to Indian warriors. They were dressed in war paint and had tribal scars all over their bare bodies. The men's faces were covered with keloid chevron-shaped scars. Some had muskets, but most had huge spears and small shields that they had crafted for themselves. A few Spanish came as well, and their weapons were a mix of old and new technology. A few foolish soldiers still wore conquistador metal chest plates with helmets. The heat was unbearable, and the soldiers had become dehydrated and too weak to be very effective. The rest were a collection of Spanish uniforms, common clothes, and weapons. It was a hodgepodge of a killing force, and the Spartans of old would have been proud, as they also numbered 300. Some of the free blacks and Spanish managed to sneak out of Fort Castillo de San Marcos during the night, and in just a short time arrived at Fort Mose before dawn. The Africans knew the inner workings of the fort intimately after living there so long. Using a series of trees as cover, the force was approaching by blind spots. They quickly and silently slipped in a small breach in the wall of the fort and assembled inside. The Spanish force almost got a third of its force inside the walls before the shouting started. The 4 men watching heard Indian, African, Spanish, and Scottish screams of terror erupt as the fighting started. It was then that it dawned on Patrick that the Scottish Highlander Rangers and the Creek were the only forces the British left to occupy the fort. The group quickly became concerned about William and his clan. The sounds of death were horrible as the fight sounded one-sided. A group of 5 kilted men came sprinting out of the fort toward the 4 hidden men. Archibald broke ranks and stood up, waving for the Highlanders to join them. The Scottishmen were already covered with blood and ran to Archibald and his crew. The Scots dove down into the marsh and vanished into the high grass. William McIntosh's voice boomed. "What the fuck was that, lads? I had never seen killing so fast. Those African savages killed many of our clan while they slept."
William, are you okay?
Archibald questioned his brother. "A retreat was ordered to abandon the fort. I have no idea how many made it out. I saw many of me clansmen lying dead with large spears sticking out of their chests." McIntosh shook with nerves while he spoke. "I had done me share of killing, but they had the spring on us. There's nothing I could have done to save me brothers. We best get away from this fort and regroup with the clan. Come join us." The 4 men agreed and followed the bloodied, cussing Scotsmen deep into the marsh. After a few hours, the battled war party came to a makeshift camp in the swamp. Men ran out to greet William's group and hugged them. Patrick saw them greet each other in Scottish, and then the arguing started. Patrick quietly leaned over and asked his employer, "What did they say?" Archibald stoically replied, "Only 18 made it back here. The fort had 120 Scots, with only 30 Indians. Over half the clan died, and only a few have been captured. They are arguing and debating about whether to go back. We best keep our distance and let the families grieve, lad." The salvaging party stayed in the shadows the rest of the night, as the kilted warriors grieved for their friends and relatives. "Most are going back to Darien. They feel they've spilled enough Scottish blood for king and country. I'm not going with them. I'm going to stay, see if there be a way to free the captives," William announced the next morning. "You're welcome to stay with our clan here, brother, and join us," Archibald said in a sympathetic tone. The bloody kilted man nodded in affirmation. Following Ligochi and Garland's careful pace, the group retraced their steps. They got as close as it was safe to the fort and waited for an opportunity. A large pile of dead were outside of Fort Mose. The Indian counted 68 dead. Most were Scottish. He also took note that there were only 10 dead African bodies and around 30 captured men. The party came across a British artillery division who were in a heated debate. The scavengers stayed their distance and listened intently. Patrick heard them arguing if they should abandon the artillery and escape. Oglethorpe's siege was not holding. The Spanish managed to sneak supply ships through the Royal Navy blockade, and any thought of starving St. Augustine into capitulation was lost. Oglethorpe now planned to storm the fortress by land while the naval ships attacked the Spanish and half-galleys in the harbor. Commodore Pierce, however, resolved to forego the British naval attack during hurricane season. The Commodore's decision angered the general because now he would have to embarrassingly withdraw his forces. His entire campaign would be for nothing if he called a retreat, and he'd be disgraced. Now the Spanish were on the attack and driving the British out. The artillery units were running for their lives and leaving the cannons behind. The British soldiers were arguing with each other about if they should leave the cannon mules behind when a spear struck a soldier in the back. A large group of black soldiers were screaming as they charged out of the woods, throwing their spears. The British returned fire with their muskets, but were caught off guard. They were quickly overwhelmed, and the few that were not already dead surrendered without a fight. The old Indian motioned for the men to leave, but by that time it was too late. Garland barked to alert the group, but when they turned around, they found themselves at spear point. 12 spears were pointed on the men, who quickly surrendered. Patrick pissed his leg in fear, knowing that in seconds they would all be dead. One black warrior was arguing with the rest of the battle-raged group. The African advocate stepped between the spears and the prisoners and started yelling at his own troops. He waved a familiar-looking Scottish battle-axe at his own men, backing them off. The group of 5 battle rats waited nervously to learn their fate.
Archibald, no worry, you not die today.
A familiar voice said. The advocate turned around, and he was hardly recognizable in his full war gear.
Alec, is that you?
Archibald replied.
Yes, friend. Gloria and I make it to Fort Mose. We free now.
The escaped slave smiled.
I tell the warriors not to kill you. I tell them how you've risked family's life to help us. I tell them you hate English. You lucky you not dressed like British. The warriors still want to kill your Indian and Highlander. Alec, please don't kill these men. They also hate the British and don't want to fight. They are like you Africans and are forced to fight for their freedom. They are used by the white man to do his bidding. They do not want to kill your men. Please help them. They're good men,
Archibald pleaded. A series of translations set in motion. The tribesmen all spoke their own language, and each conversation had to be translated many times. There was much heated debate, and the infighting between the warriors was lengthy. Finally, Alec explained,
You may return home in peace. No Africans be killing you, but we no speak for the Spanish. We keep these British cannon men as prisoners. You stay here. You not run off and warn other British we coming.
The 5 men nodded in agreement and sat on the ground unthreateningly, while they watched the black soldiers regroup and head out to kill more British. The Africans vanished into the marsh as quietly as ghosts. Patrick's feeling of terror was starting to flee. The pounding of his heart was returning to normal as he stopped shaking with fear. He stood up and could not figure out why the rest of the group was smiling ear to ear. Did I miss something? We were all just about to meet the devil by spear, Patrick questioned.
Yes, that was a bit close, lad. But you might be looking around now.
Macintosh laughed. Patrick saw 8 cannons completely alone and unguarded. There was a small army of mules, as well as artillery carts of gunpowder, cannonballs, and supplies.
Folks scrounging for muskets. Those cannons could make us rich for the rest of our lives. Archibald, we have to take them and conceal them now,
the large Scotsman stated with excitement. All eyes fell on Archibald.
Ligochi, can you find a place to hide these?
The old Indian reflected as he searched his memory.
Yes. A cave I found hunting when I was a young warrior, 2 days into the marsh. We must leave now. All mules in one line. We must take them down the river to hide tracks.
The savvy men wasted no time seizing the opportunity. They clumsily formed a mule and cannon parade and marched the entire lot into the swamp. They slowly moved the line of cannons and carts for hours. The white-haired Indian kept retracing their path and trying to hide the deep wheel tracks. He did his best, and his efforts would fool a novice, but not an experienced tracker. The party slowed to a crawl as they maneuvered down streams and creeks to completely erase their tracks. They were even blessed with a hard rain to further melt their prints in the earth. Fear drove them into the night, and they did not stop to rest. They knew if the Spanish or Africans saw them, they would kill them on sight. If the British caught them, they'd be hung as thieves. It was a very dangerous game they played. After 2 exhausting days of travel, the group arrived at 2 groups of large burial mounds hidden deep in the swamp. The Indian man summoned his companions for help. In front of one of the mounds was a large pile of stones.
Whoa, whoa, Isaac exclaimed. This is not a cave, this is a tomb. I'm not digging up a tomb. We need to find somewhere else to hide these. No, those mounds are sacred. This mound fake tomb. No Indian ever open it, it's safe. Now move rock, big man,
the Indian explained. It took a long time to move all the rocks, but the crew was amazed at what was revealed. The mound had been an entrance to a large underground room. It still had barrels and some tools in it. The walls of the massive underground chamber were actually buttressed with timber, and the cave was very deep. It was higher ground in the swamp, so it was not flooded inside by the rains.
My tribe hide here from Spanish soldiers and slavers. Took many moons to build. Men forget this place for many years. Cannon safe here.
Ligo Chi said proudly. The men worked all morning and carefully used the mules to position the cannons in the carts. The massive chamber was crammed full. The men would argue to reposition the cannons and the carts over and over, trying to make them all fit. Finally, Isaac discovered a pattern that would allow everything to fit neatly. They used the oil in the canopies in the carts to protect the cannons. They were dried off and then covered with oil so as not to rust. Then everything was covered with canopies. The tomb was sealed back up with rocks to match the appearance of the others. The men were grinning proudly at their hard work. Archibald suggested to push on and camp away from the spot in case the men were being pursued. The men did their best to wipe clean the area of tracks, to appear as no one ever stopped there. The exhausted group finally made camp and reveled in their good fortune.
Lads, it'll be perfect if we pull this off. The English will assume they were abandoned and the Spanish stole them. The Spanish will assume the English recovered them and not go looking for them.
It is truly devious of us, Archibald bragged.
I know someone interested in buying these cannons. But we will have to come back out and move them out to the coast. Great warrior, will you help us? I want profit of 4 cannons,
the Indian replied.
I'll give you the profit of 3 cannons and all the mules.
Archibald negotiated. The old man accepted this with a smile and held out his arm. Archibald locked wrist in the Creek custom.
I will take the mules with me and hide them. 2 months at full moon, come back to move cannons,
the Indian instructed.
Tomorrow take different paths. Draw map for you to return home safe.
The men agreed in short time and all were asleep, even Garland.